let's talk about ecology of motion. The body has this underlying concept to it, and that it's trying to be as efficient as possible. Your body is always trying to balance its energy sources and conserve as much as possible, and that's sort of true for most of biology in general. So when it comes to motion, the same holds true. The body tries to accomplish tasks based on what is the most efficient motion it can perform. Hand in hand, this with habit formation and the idea that the body is doing things habitually with motions and efficiency in mind. Now, the way a body is going to move is more based on the current constraints the system has. So what is a constraint? What are we kind of talking about here? Well, there's a concept that came from Bernstein back in 1967 that any movement has an infinite amount of potential solutions based on every joint, every muscle fiber that is in play in a given task. There are infinite permutations to completing that task. So there isn't necessarily one perfect motion that is occurring that is ideal. Each of these optional movements is considered a degree of freedom. However, there are some constraints that the body is going to have in order to complete a task, but these come in two different flavors. The first would be actual physiological limitations. You have a shortened muscle, a weak muscle, a joint capsule that doesn't want to move. Your body can't use those specific motions due to those constraints. The other type of constraint is one that the central nervous system actually applies to your body, right? Your body, when attempting to perform a task, yes, has infinite possibilities, but your CNS may have determined a grouping of best solutions. So it's self-regulating the possibilities to generalized concepts or sort of families of movements. So I'm reaching up to this cupboard and I'm going to use my right upper extremity with an upright spinal column, right? It's not going to have me side bending and doing some twisting or something weird. Another way to think about constraints applied by the central nervous system is that you aren't causing your action with constraints, you are limiting other actions from actually occurring. Children are an excellent example of constraints. Developmental milestones are based on what the system is now allowed to do, right? Newell put it best in his article that the patterns of coordination that emerge during infancy and early childhood are due to the changing constraints imposed on action rather than the acquisition of prescriptions for action, right? This translates to a kid now crawls because they got the available muscle strength, length, and range to be able to do it, right? We may go into concepts of constraints later on in sort of like a performance section, going into the differences of organismic, environmental, or task constraints, but for now, it's just important to understand how motion occurs. We just discussed in this section the role that all those different joints, muscles, fascia have on performing and controlling motion, and how they all boil down to potential constraints that are limiting motion potentially, or different strategies your body can now utilize. I ask my residents and fellows often, does this patient need to make their current strategy more robust, or do they need a new strategy? And this is really talking about what are the constraints in play. But we can dive into that more as we go through these content sections together.